From Iraq's weapons of mass destruction to Venezuela's narco-terror, the playbook remains quite similar. The United States has repeatedly invoked false justifications to launch military interventions against sovereign nations, undermining the foundational principles of international laws. Well, the two cases exemplify this pattern. First, Trump's recent operation against Venezuela, and second, Bush's 2003 invasion of Iraq. Both operations deployed manufactured crises as political cover while pursuing undisclosed strategic objectives, ultimately leaving the world with demolished nations and shattered American credibility. Well, in this edition of From the News Desk, we'll talk about how Trump has done something that Bush had already done back in 2003. Times have changed, world is different now, but Republican playbook hasn't changed a bit. Let's start with Venezuela first. The United States launched a military operation against Venezuela, capturing President Maduro and his wife. The Trump administration publicly justified the intervention by citing Venezuela's role in supplying cocaine to the United States, framing the operation as a response to America's drug crisis. However, Trump's narrative proved to be a lemon, and we are not saying it. It's the data which proves him wrong. Well, according to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and also according to international law enforcement authorities, Venezuela is not a major producer of cocaine, but rather a minor transit country. Now, the thing here to note is the vast majority of cocaine flowing through Venezuela channels is destined for Europe, not the United States. Meanwhile, 90% of the cocaine consumed in the United States comes from Colombia, with Venezuela amounting for only 10% of US destined cocaine transshipments. Not only this, but according to the US Drug Enforcement Administration's 2025 National Drug Threat Assessment Report, the vast majority of drugs entering the US goes through the border with Mexico. In fact, drug shipments of this very route are controlled by Mexican-based cartels, not Venezuela. Yet the true motivation for American military action emerged through Trump's own statements. Trump himself made this explicit. US oil companies would go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And that the US would be reimbursed through revenue from Venezuela's oil reserves. Now let's take you back 2 decades ago. The United States employed an identical pattern: false pretext, military invasion, and international law violation. On March 20, 2003, the US-led coalition invaded Iraq, justifying the operation by claiming that President Saddam Hussein possessed stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction that posed an imminent threat to the international security apparatus. The search and Bush's claim proved futile. After 3 years of intensive investigation, the Iraq Survey Group, the official US-led inspection body tasked to locate the Iraqi WMD, concluded with absolute certainty that no stockpile existed. In fact, the CIA's official findings released in 2004 stated very categorically that Iraqi President Hussein did not possess stockpiles of illicit weapons at the time of US invasion in March 2003. Well, the report also stated that had not begun any program to produce them. Well, then comes the United Nations Monitoring, Verification and Inspection Commission and ISG's collective report, which stated that it failed to find any of the alleged stockpiles used as the invasion's rationale. Well, some remnant chemical warheads were discovered, but they dated back to the Iran-Iraq war era, with none newer than 1991. When the head of the Iraq Survey Group, Charlie Dulfer, testified before the US Senate Armed Service Committee in January 2004, he admitted bluntly, "We were almost all wrong." Now, both the Venezuela and Iraqi interventions follow an identical structure: manufacture a crisis, invoke that false pretext as legal justification, execute military action outside international law frameworks, and pursued undisclosed geopolitical and economic objectives. In Iraq's case, the invasion destabilized an entire region, killing over 1 million Iraqis, displaced millions more, and created a power vacuum that spawned ISIS. It fundamentally damaged America's credibility on world stage. Similarly, the Venezuela operation signals that 20 years after Iraq, the United States has learned nothing about international law or the consequences of unilateral military force. The operation violated the bedrock principle that state cannot unilaterally invade other nations. The pattern reflects a fundamental erosion of rule-based international order. When powerful states repeatedly violate international law with impunity, the system itself ceases to function. And the United States has twice demonstrated that when geopolitical interest aligns with military capability, international law becomes negotiable. Well, the pretext changes, but the violations remains consistent.